Hi friend, I just wanted to take a minute to invite you to our Lash Biz Babes Experience 2026. This is a one-day all online event happening on May 2nd, and our theme for the year is going all in. We are shaking things up and doing it differently than anyone ever has before. This is going to be an all online event as usual, but it's going to be 100% a curated journey throughout your day as we guide you through the mindset, strategy, and passion needed to go all in on your business to make it your best year in business yet. All lash artists, estheticians, and beauty professionals are invited to join us. There will be guided sessions, interactive workshops, a panel discussion, and big giveaways happening throughout that whole day. And tickets are on sale now for only $199. Payment plans are available. Let's go all in on our businesses for 2026 together. All the details and the link for tickets are down in the show notes below. I would love to have you join us online in May. Welcome to Lash Biz Babes, the podcast for solo beauty business owners who want to build a full clientele and create a business and life that they truly love. My name is Erica. I'm your host. I'm a lash artist turned beauty business coach, lash educator, and social media manager for salons and beauty businesses. I'm so happy that you're here. Let's go ahead and jump into today's episode. Welcome to this week's episode of Lash Biz Babes. My name is Erica. I'm your host, and this week we're going to be talking about appointment time management for lash artists. So this can somewhat be applicable to other service types as well, just the overarching theme of being able to manage your time better with your appointments. But I am going to speak directly to lash artists today just because my background is in lashing, and I'm just going to give you all of the specifics and details on exactly how I mapped out my appointment timing so that I could stay on track, give my clients the best service, and be able to know when to book my next one and all of those things. This can be especially helpful if you are a beginner lash artist, you're just getting into lashing and you don't really have your timing down yet. I think the timing does come with the more you practice and the more you lash, but this can be something that's useful for you to be able to manage your time in the meantime and make sure you're staying on track and you're able to book one client after the next. And I did used to teach this in my lash extension training, so I thought, hey, let's just bring it onto the show today. So this, especially like I was saying, this can be good when you're first starting out. It's good to also map out your appointment timing, right? So you might map out their lengths and like lash map, what style are we doing, what lengths are going where, things like that. Just kind of like how you map out that, you can also map out your appointment timing. This will allow you to know how long to schedule appointments for. It's going to keep you on track time-wise during your appointments. And it's also going to help you eventually cut down on your timing later on. So while you're still learning lashes, and if you're like a beginner lash artist, it's still super important to focus on mastering the basics like isolation and proper adhesive use, proper direction, fan symmetry, all of those kinds of things. Like you want your technique to be on point still. You want to master those things before you really focus on your timing. You don't just want to rush through everything and give them a poor set, because that also will create poor lashing habits as you move forward as well. You don't want to get in bad habits with lashing. You're going to stick to those and they're going to be really hard to break later on. So you want to create good lashing habits from the start and make sure you're doing things properly and focusing on and mastering the basics. But this can still be something to help you manage the timing. Really, like cutting down on your time is going to come with practice, creating the muscle memory, and just getting more experience. So I say when you're practicing, whether it's on models or you're doing it on a mannequin, you want to practice as perfectly as possible to build up that muscle memory and those good lashing habits. And the more you do that, the more that's going to translate into your appointments, and that will help you cut down on your timing. So your focus right now is quality versus quantity, or how fast you can go. But this is how you can map out your timing just to make sure you're giving yourself enough time to be able to give them a quality set, and you're keeping yourself on track during appointments as well. So an example, full set time mapping. I always mapped out my full sets of volume lashes for 3 hours, and that would include literally everything that I needed to do during that time frame, from consent form to the consultation to prepping, lash mapping, actually lashing them, finishing products, whether you're using sealant, your nanomisting, your whatever that looks like, untaping, and then also checking out and rebooking. So that maps out every step I need to take, because if you're only thinking about the amount of time you're going to be lashing them for, you're not taking into account all the other things, and a lot of times you'll end up going into your next appointment and then you're running late for the day and then you're all stressed out. This is an example of how I would map out a 3-hour volume full set. So 3 hours is 180 minutes. I'm going to take and map out time for each step that I need to take. Full sets, they're typically a new client to you. They're probably going to have to fill out a consent form if they haven't already done it online prior to their appointment, right? If they need to fill it out at the beginning of the service, that's probably going to take at least 5 minutes. I do recommend sending these out ahead of time virtually or like online. That way it's already taken care of and it cuts down on time during the appointment, but you still do need time to review the consent form. So something to take into consideration. I always mapped out at least 5 minutes for consent form though. That way they had time to fill it out and I had time to look it over. So that would be 5 minutes of consent form time. Then I mapped it out to 5 to 7 minutes of client consultation time. Now, depending on your consultation process, you might need more time than that. I had my consultations down to a science to where I could do a good, thorough consultation in about 5 to 7 minutes, depending on the client. Sometimes it would take a little bit longer than that. Sometimes it would take a little bit less. So it really kind of depends on your process of how you do your actual consultations. Figure out what the average amount of time that takes is and map that out. But I typically did about 5 to 7 minutes. So then I would do 10 minutes of lash prep. So that, taping, priming, lash bath, whatever steps you take, because I know we all have different styles of doing things. So you decide what prep steps you need to take and then map out time for that, set aside time for that. The next thing, I always set aside like 3 to 5 minutes to actually map out the lashes, like to lash map. I didn't always like write it on the pads, but just at least in my head, okay, this is what I'm gonna do. But if you do write it on the pads, that could be your time to like draw it out, write the links on there, things like that. And then I did 140 minutes of lashing time. So with volume, this is, doing all volume fans, things like that. So you're working it evenly across both eyes while prioritizing bottom layer lashes, because when they open their eyes in the mirror, they're going to be able to see the bottom lashes most visibly. And so you want to make sure that a lot of that bottom layer, if not all of that bottom layer, as much of it as possible is lashed, so that it doesn't look like they're missing lashes or that you missed anything or there's gaps anywhere, because that's going to be what is most visible. So those bottom layer lashes were always a priority for me to be able to get full coverage on them. So working evenly across both eyes while you're prioritizing the bottom layer lashes, and then also prioritizing inner and outer corners. I feel like a set doesn't look as complete if you're missing inner and outer corners. It just pulls everything together really well. So those were always my priority. Bottom layer lashes, inner corner, outer corners. The end goal is full lash line coverage with no noticeable gaps, even if you don't lash every single lash. So especially when you're newer, it can be hard to get to 100% coverage in the amount of time you have scheduled. Like, definitely try and give yourself enough time to get as much coverage as possible. But like, okay, you have to pick an amount of time to book the appointment for, whether that's 3 hours, 4 hours. I would not recommend doing 5 hours or more, whatever. But you have to pick an amount of time to schedule the appointment for, and you only have that amount of time to lash in. So this helps you decide, okay, this is my actual lashing time. Here's my priority on what needs to get done for sure. And then I'm going to get as much coverage as I can, but as long as you have even coverage across that full lash line with no noticeable gaps, you can miss some lashes without it being like, it's not going to make a difference. Like, you could get like 80, 90, 95% coverage and it still looks really good even though you didn't lash every single lash, versus like if you got like, I don't know, 90, 80, 90% coverage but you didn't finish the inner corners, that's going to be really noticeable and it's not going to look good, of course. So even lash coverage across the lash line on both eyes, and then even if you miss maybe some of those, top layer middle lashes, it's not going to be that big of a deal. And I think when you're first starting out with lashing, that can be important too, because you're probably not going to get full coverage every single time for every single client and get 100% coverage. So you want to make sure it's even and that it's across the full lash line. And then that way it still looks really good, even though you're not quite to the 100% coverage, but you can still make that your goal long term, of course, is to get as much coverage as possible. So I did 140 minutes of lashing time in this example, and then that would be 10 minutes to finish. So whether you're sealing or nanomisting, fanning, untaping, whatever your finish steps are, bonder, everyone does it differently. So whatever your finishing steps are, I gave myself 10 minutes for finishing, and that also included showing them a mirror. And then I did 3 to 5 minutes to check out and rebook. That usually didn't take me very long. And if you aren't asking clients to rebook after their appointments, definitely do that while they're there. Even if they say, "Hey, I'm not gonna have to look at my schedule," that's not a big deal. Like, okay, fine, great. I'll reach out to you in a couple weeks and check in, if you haven't booked by then. It's you don't be afraid to try and rebook clients. So that would be just an example of mapping out a 3-hour volume full set. You don't have to have the same time frames that I do. The point of this is that you're figuring out every step you need to take during a lash appointment and mapping out how much time you're going to take for each step. So then that way you know, okay, I'm going to look at the clock. I'm going to pay attention. Oh, I need to be moving on to the next thing. I need to keep on track with this. It keeps your time management on point. You could even set like a little quiet timer or alarm if you needed to, so that you know like when to transition to the next step. And it just keeps you on track. It helps you manage your time well during the appointment. So the next one I'm going to give you is actually for an example of time mapping for a fill. And I did this example as a hybrid fill because I had a really specific way of mapping out appointment times for hybrid, or like if you're mixing different lash types together, like you're doing some volume fans, some classics, some, wispy, spikes, what, I don't know. There's all kinds of things now. Wet lashes, angel lashes, all those things. But for hybrid, so I booked these for 90 minutes. Your appointment times might look different. And again, it's how many minutes, what steps you need to take, and how much time are you going to spend on each step. So for a 90-minute hybrid fill, that was 10 minutes of lash prep time. And during this time, when they're coming back for a fill, and I'm taping them up, I'm doing a lash bath or priming or getting things ready to go, doing my lash mapping during this time. I'm also going to talk to them and check to see how they're liking the lashes. Is there anything you want to change today? Do we need to adjust the style at all? Was there any issues with them? Do you have any questions on aftercare? Things like that. So you're kind of multitasking. You're getting that information you need from them while you're prepping and getting them ready to go. So I did about 10 minutes of that. Sometimes it would take a little bit longer, but that's the general idea for me. Then I would take about 5 to 7 minutes to remove grown out extensions from both eyes. You can even still be talking to them about, how was aftercare? Did you have any questions? Do you want to change anything? Make sure you're removing the outgrown lashes from both eyes. Make sure you have time set aside for that. And then that gave me 60 minutes of actual lashing time. So when I did hybrid sets, what I liked to do with this is break it down into time frames, because people are like, "Oh my gosh, I was supposed to do a hybrid set and I went way overboard on the volume fans, and then I didn't put very many classics in, and then it looked really full, whatever." And there's all kinds of artistic creativity and liberty that you can take with what that ends up looking like, or what your hybrid sets look like, because we all have different styles of doing things as lash artists. But how I like to do things to try and stay on track and keep it even and give them the set that they wanted or the style that they wanted was I would break it down into how many minutes of volume fans am I doing and how many minutes of classic lashes am I going to do. So if I had 60 minutes of lashing time, depending on, how full they wanted it or what style, I'm going to break that down into, okay, they want a hybrid set, but they want more fullness to it. So maybe I'm going to do a little bit more time with fans, and then I'll do some time with classic lashes. But for most hybrid sets with the style that I did, it was going to be split evenly. So if there's 60 minutes of lashing time, I'm going to do 30 minutes of volume fans and 30 minutes of classic lashes. So again, working evenly across both eyes while prioritizing noticeable gaps. So if they were like picking or something, you're going to see like a visible gap where they were pulling lashes out of, right? That's how you can tell if they were picking or not, because if it's just natural lash fallout, it's going to be random and across the whole lash line in random spots. But if they were picking, you're going to notice a gap in the lash line where multiple lashes are missing in the same area. Something happened there. They were picking, they did something, lashes got pulled out somehow. So prioritize any noticeable gaps. Prioritize the bottom layer lashes, the inner corners and the outer corners. The end goal, like I was saying, is to have full lash line coverage with no noticeable gaps, even if you're not lashing every single lash. So then it would be 10 minutes of finishing time, sealing, bonding, nanomisting, fanning, and taping, showing the mirror, whatever steps you take during that time. And then I would do 3 to 5 minutes of checkout and rebook. So that mapped out how much time for each. And I think specifically with this is like knowing, okay, how many minutes am I going to do for volume? How many minutes am I going to do for classics? So I had a lash artist who was working with me once upon a time in my studio, and she was doing, I believe it was a hybrid full set. And so she was like, okay, and she worked one eye at a time. So I liked to work back and forth on eyes just because I felt like it kept things even. Then, just in case the appointment needs to get cut short for whatever reason, something happens, you still have even coverage on both eyes. And then, even if you're not completely done yet or you don't have full coverage, it still looks even and it still looks good. They could walk out the door and there's not going to be an issue with any noticeable gaps. So I like to do it that way, but her style of lashing, she'd like to do one eye at a time. There's pros and cons to both ways. I'm not saying one way is better than the other. If you do one at a time, I'm not judging or anything like that. Do what works best for you. I'm going to tell you this story though. She was working one eye at a time. So she texted me mid-appointment, kind of freaking out and panicking because she was like, I took way too long on putting the volume fans in on the one eye, and now I don't have enough time to do the same amount on the other eye. And she's like, and now I only have an hour left of the appointment and I don't know what to do. Like, I'm panicking. I'm not going to finish in time. So I was like, okay, just fill in the rest on that eye that you were doing with classics, do a few minutes of classics on that one, get as many on there as you can, and then start on the next eye. And I said, do as many fans as you can across the lash line in 30 minutes. Like, just give yourself 30 minutes for volume fans, and then spend 20 minutes just filling in filling in as many as you can with the classic lashes, and then wrap things up and try and just make it even. So it's like, okay, we need to just manage the time on this because you're not going to have time. And because she's like, I have another client after this. She'd spent too much time on the one eye and doing volume fans. And I was like, hey, how are we going to make this even in the amount of time? Let's figure out, do as many volume fans as you can in this amount of time and do them evenly across the lash line so it gives good coverage across the full lash line. So you're not just going to do some in the middle or work your way from one side of the eye to the other. Make it even across the lash line and then just fill in with classic lashes and get as much coverage as you can during the next 20 minutes. So that just kind of gives you an example of first off, why managing your time during an appointment is important, especially if you are only working on one eye at a time. But then also okay, we're prioritizing coverage across the full lash line, the bottom layer lashes, the inner corner, outer corner, so it looks like an even full set, even though you didn't get full coverage. But then we're also going to say, okay, here's how much time for this, here's how much time for this, and you can give yourself those benchmarks during the appointment time. I actually learned a lot about this from working at a franchise studio. I know there's pros and cons to working there, and they definitely prioritized quantity of sets over quality of sets, but it did give me a really good basis of how to manage my time during an appointment and how to give them a good set, even if I didn't have a lot of time to do so. Because there would be instances where they would book me in with a full fill during I don't know what was supposed to be a touch-up time. So I really learned how to manage my time well because of that. So if you're struggling with this or you're a newer lash artist, this is how I would recommend mapping out your time. Figure out how many minutes you're giving yourself for the appointment altogether, and then write out the steps, every single step you need to take during the appointment, and map out how much time you have for each within that. And then that's really going to help you keep on track during your actual appointment time. So if you guys have questions on this, feel free to reach out to me on Instagram at XOEricaShram. I'll have the link for that down in the show notes. But I hope this was helpful for you. And if you guys liked this episode format with like a little more like lashing tips, let me know because I can definitely do more of these if you liked this and feel like it was helpful or beneficial for you. I'm realizing there's so much more of where this came from. Maybe I should pull more of this into the podcast, but let me know if you guys liked this. Definitely go subscribe to the show wherever you listen to podcasts at so you can get notified when we have new episodes go live every Tuesday. And I hope that you have a wonderful week.